Good afternoon, colleagues. My name is Danga Muwogo. I am the Program Manager for Well-Governed Cities at the South African Cities Network, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this event, this afternoon event of the Community of Practice in Urban Governance and Municipal Finance at the South African Cities Network in partnership with the Stellenbosch School of Public Leadership. The South African Cities Network was established in 2002 by the mayors of the then 6 metropolitan municipalities, along with the Department of Provincial and Local Government and the South African Local Government Association, as a think tank, if you will, to address and to do research on the policy challenges facing that unique subset of metropolitan municipalities identified in the 1998 White Paper on Local Government that was so critical to achieving developmental local government for the majority of citizens in the country. This community of practice, it builds on SACN's model of what we call reference groups, which are groups constituted primarily consisting of practitioners, but also of anybody with any interest in the local government space, stakeholders in the space, and so on, to share and disseminate knowledge. And this particular webinar is no exception. It's now my pleasure to ask you to hand over, to the chair of this session, who will be Tanya Ajam, who is a professor of public policy, finance, and economics at the Stellenbosch School of Public Leadership, and she will be facilitating the session today. Over to you, Tanya.
Thank you, Danga. Welcome, everybody, from a chilly but sunny Cape Town. Our webinar today is going to focus on the proposals in Chapter 2 of the local reviewed white paper on local government. It's going to be looking at the proposals on municipal systems and categorization reform. To kick us off, I'm going to invite Mr. Pascal Malloy to briefly go through what those proposals are so that we're all on the same page. Mr. Malloy is a governance and planning and development specialist who has been involved in the local government sector for more than 30 years. He was the city manager of the city of Johannesburg. He has served as a member of the National Planning Commission, various ministerial advisory and task teams. He was the CEO of the Housing Development Agency. He's currently a consultant at MPM Consulting Services. He's a member of the Municipal Demarcations Board, and pertinently for our webinar today, he is the convener of the 1998 white paper review process. So he's got a lot of expertise and institutional memories. And so I'm going to hand over to Mr. Malloy to take us through those proposals. Over to you, Pascal.
No, thanks, Tanya. Again, it's been quite a pleasure to see you again. It's been a long time. What I'll do, I'll just paraphrase really what's in Chapter 2 of the white paper. Deal with the problem, some policy proposals, and maybe a conclusion. I hope I won't be too long, but safe to say that it's one thing to jump into Chapter 2. But if you read the white paper, I think it's quite important that people go back into Chapter 1 because it sets the frame and the logic and why we need to have this white paper review in the first instance. And it raises some pillars there, and one of them deals specifically with the need for differentiation. But the two important ones is the shift to talk more about transforming an entire local government system. I mean, government system to help local government fulfill its mandate. And you'll find that very strongly in Chapter 1. But the other point that it makes, it's about trying to get development governance well coordinated at a local government level, unlike the 1998 white paper that talked more about a developmental form of local government. So this slight shift from saying that we want to talk more about governance, that's developmental at local government, at local level, comes in very clearly when you read the rest of the chapters. So yeah, I thought maybe I should just make those 2 points. The third point also to make is that you might be sitting in front of you there with the draft that was gazetted and which closed, I think, is the 28th of May or so. And maybe some of the points that I'll be raising would have had the advantage of having taken into account the 156 submissions or so that we received, and having discussions amongst ourselves with the department as a drafting team, and having further conversations with a number of key stakeholders, key sector departments like finance, like SALGA, within the department itself, that might maybe have introduced one or two changes to what you might have in front of you. But I'm confident that Chapter 2 hasn't quite changed fundamentally from what was gazetted. So the problem, I mean, there are a number of problem statements that we made. I thought maybe I should just lift two. One, that the current institutional model of the local government no longer to municipal variation. Municipalities differ in size, in population, in distance, in topography, in their economic basis, their ruralityness, connectivity, development levels, and capability. Some municipalities are located in areas where formal local government did not exist before democracy, especially if you look at the TVBC states, or the Bantustans, as we call them, and that the current category system offers too few institutional choices. For instance, the single-tier metropolitan municipalities and districts and local municipalities sharing authority. It's limited to that. Large local municipalities have also weakened local democracy. So that's some of the problems, one of the 5 or so problems that we list in the paper. The big one is that the one-size-fits-all allocation of municipal powers creates failures at both ends of the spectrum. On the one hand, some municipalities are expected to perform functions beyond what is realistic for their conditions or capability, while others are muzzled, are restricted even where they have the capacity, or may have potentially the capacity and willingness to do more. So the policy intent largely retains is that we can, as much as possible, retain the constitutional guarantees of municipalities as authorities. And looking at Schedule 4B and 5B, there might be suggestions further down the line that we might want to look at amendments which might require constitutional amendments on 4B and 5B. And subject only to intervention under Section 139 of the Constitution. Within that guarantee, the white paper establishes a differentiated institutional system that better matches municipal form, service provision, and additional responsibilities to local conditions and municipal capacity. So there are two policy reform directions that are contained in the paper. The first is a differentiated two-tier system where 2 tiers are retained only where they serve developmental governance and service delivery. The second approach is differentiation in municipal powers and responsibilities, including service provisions under municipal authority, the division of powers between districts and local municipalities, interventions where constitutional authority must be removed and returned, and assignment of additional responsibilities over and above 4B and 5B. So those are the two directions that the white paper proposes. So the white paper then, in terms of those key reforms, establishes a broader range of Category A options so that non-metro urbanized municipalities can become single-tier municipalities where appropriate, the so-called non-metro Category A municipalities. And the current suspects are your 43 secondary cities, for instance, your Polokwanes, your Nsunduzis, your Sol Blackies, and all that they might just as well be candidates for establishment as Category A municipalities, but not necessarily metros. The white paper reorients district municipalities towards coordinating and supporting local municipalities by removing directly elected district councillors and making district councils compromise delegations from local municipalities. You know, after the elections, the IC goes back and then we elect direct councillors to go into the district council and council. I mean, effectively, our district councils have become a fourth tier or a tier on its own, or a sphere, maybe a tier. Yes, a tier on its own. If you look at the current practice, which was probably not the intention of the original 1998 white paper. Thirdly, that the white paper also established improved differentiation in service provision through at least five things. One, looks at the licensing regime across municipal service providers, more licensing, better licensing, stronger regulation, more than just NERSA, but looking at other key services and looking at the licensing options. Two, through a single government-wide framework for shifting powers between districts and local municipalities that will have a powers roadmap run maybe in a sequenced way over time, but it should be a single government-wide framework, not a differentiated one where one sector department looks at allocating or accrediting or assigning powers outside a single government-wide framework to look at the shifting of powers between districts and local municipalities, or even between municipalities, provinces, and national. A revised intervention framework for removing and gradually returning authority. There's an IMSA bill that the department is running with at the moment, and we want much more early intervention, much more direct intervention, more time rather than the current provisions. Maybe some interventions might require more than a year, more than 2 years, and that needs to be looked at. Fourthly, we're looking at one binding national statutory framework for assigning additional responsibilities to municipalities. I think I mixed that up also with the second bullet point there when we talked about district and locals. And lastly, that we need one or single policy, national policy framework to guide all instruments of differentiation in municipal authorities. So we think that the implementation and transition will have to be sequenced in a way. That implementation required statutory amendments in most cases, institutional designs and careful sequencing. For instance, the Municipal Structures Act, the Independent Municipal Demarcations Authority Act. I'm glad that Dr. Paul is here, can talk a bit to that. And relevant electoral legislation may or must be amended to broaden the criteria for Category A municipalities, bind the Municipal Demarcations Board to national criteria on where two-tier local government is appropriate, and define the role of districts, remove directly elected district councils, and regulate the composition of local municipality delegations where necessary. Secondly, we need a sequenced way of looking at the framework for shifting powers between districts and locals, as we said in the previous slide, and also looking at national legislation that must provide for the licensing of entities to deliver municipal services under the municipal authority. I think right through we want to retain as much as possible. In fact, we have to retain municipalities as authorities, but then the providers might be might take different forms, either as entities or as partnerships, or a whole lot of approaches are available there. That the legal framework for externalizing municipal services must be simplified, especially where externalization is triggered by national or provincial intervention. The big one is about the Intergovernmental Monitoring Support and Intervention Bill, or Act, as I've said, that the Municipal Finance Management Act and other intervention-related legislation must be reviewed for alignment within the revised Section 139 framework, and that might require a constitutional change. That a single statutory framework must also be adopted for the allocation of powers and functions to local government, including district local powers, interventions, linked removal, and return of authority and assignment of additional responsibilities. So in short then, colleagues, without taking too much of your time, there are these seven policy choices that we summarize at the end. One, broaden Category A municipalities and retain the two-tier system only where appropriate. So I guess that the assessments, the capacity assessments, the decisions on criteria for categories and all that might have to be looked through the demarcations board and other entities. Dr. Paul can talk a little bit about that. We need, number 2, to reorientate district municipalities towards local municipal coordination and support. And that's the point that we're making about the non-directly elected councillors to districts. 3, license municipal service providers and differentiate service provision under the municipal authority. 4, improve the division of powers between districts and local municipalities. 5, use interventions differently to remove and gradually return authority to municipal councils or administrations. 6, establish one binding assignment framework for additional responsibilities. And lastly, adopt one national policy framework for differentiation in municipal authorities. Chapter 11 then will try and detail out the specifics around when, who, how these policy reforms are implemented in the short term, in the medium term, and definitely over the long term. Let me stop there, Tanya, and I hope it helps the process today.
Thanks, Pascal. We note that we have been working on the gazetted version, and there has been some evolution, as you pointed out. Thank you for outlining the policy options. I'm now going to invite Johan Medler to come and share his thoughts on which of these options are desirable and feasible, and how can we phase them in without disrupting service delivery. I almost feel that I don't need to introduce Johan Medler, but he is currently the city manager of Tshwane since 2022. He's a seasoned administrator with an LLM from Lund University in Sweden, and also an LLB from the University of the Western Cape. Over his 30-year-long career, he has led several municipalities, playing a key role in strategic planning, performance management, and intergovernmental relations. And he's also working on a book, which I hope will come out soon, so I can share that with my students. Over to you, Johan. As a practitioner as well as an academic, what are your views?
Thank you very much, Tanya, and a very good afternoon to all of the colleagues that are on this call, and then to my colleagues also that are part of the panel. One would see a lot of things, Pascal, as you would know, over a 30-year period. And certainly as it is that we were there at the start when the local government white paper was developed in '98. One is here now, where we have the ability to look back and to say, okay, that this is what we think the next 30 years should be based on. So I do think that it is time, and the white paper review is timeless. It is time now to look. It is. If anything and everything is feasible. So that's the first point I want to make as a practitioner. But one must lay the groundwork. In other words, we have to understand where we are at, and you have to understand what has led to where we are, and exactly what it is that we need to change. And I do think that the white paper identifies that. When it comes to whether something is feasible or not, whether any of the 7 options or a combination of them are feasible, one would have to look at the municipality as a whole, look at its capacity, and so in terms of the capacity, you have to look at the administration. You have to look, secondly, at the council itself, the structure of the council, the quality of the councillors. I think that's a very important consideration, the quality of the political executive. And then thirdly, you have to look at the area of jurisdiction. What is the environment? Now, we all know that there's massive urbanization. Between 70 to 80% of the residents in our country now live in urbanized areas So there must be a focus on those areas. So yes, I agree that there must be a focus on having a two-tier system, or a one-tier system, my apologies, and to expand that then also to the secondary cities. But we have to be able to attract staff. Currently, that is a problem in government. At the city of Tshwane, currently, we are struggling to attract competent staff, qualified staff, in order to, for example, drive the reforms on metro trading services. And that is already a red light. So attracting staff in order to deal with a bigger economy, with a more advanced economy, that is going to be absolutely critical. So this part of the white paper must then talk to the capacity building portion of the local government white paper. Similarly, with councillors, that one would really would need the best of the best when it comes to the political executive. And then, as far as the area of jurisdiction is concerned, the municipality must have full autonomy, full control over the levers of revenue. That is critically important. So planning and the planning authority, and then the revenue authority, that is critical. And there, the ESCOMs of the world, the water boards of the world must also come to the party. There, where a municipality has the right and the authority, it must continue, and it must strengthen its ability to levy and to collect service charges. So that is very important. When it comes to the last point I want to make with regard to whether it can work, the phasing in. The phasing in has to assume, and we have to assume, that there are certain areas where it's a dead certainty where there would be single-tier system. It is impossible to manage a city or manage an area, maybe it's not a city, to manage an area without knowing that it is a dead certainty that it will be a single tier system. That will be a single tier system within a particular time frame. Because that is how we plan, that is how we budget. And if that is not certain, it will lay the framework for inertia. Things will not happen, because you need to plan, you need to get the right people on board. So identifying those areas and making sure that the intergovernmental relations are such that the whole of government is then working towards that particular outcome in an area is critical for the implementation. Tanya, I'll think I'll halt there for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Johan. I now want to call on to our second speaker from the Municipal Demarcation Board, Dr. Paul Radikonyana. Dr. Paul is a Senior Manager, Advisory and Research at the Municipal Demarcation Board. He has earned his PhD from the University of Pretoria, which is also my alma mater, so well done. He's been involved in teaching and research at various higher education institutions and has published extensively in the areas of governance, public sector performance, and sports and tourism. Dr. Paul, over to you. You have 8 to 10 minutes to share your views on the feasibility of the options and how they can be phased in without unduly disrupting service delivery.
Thank you, Tanya, and greetings to participants who have joined this session and my colleagues who are also participants as panelists here. Yes, of course, Pascal talked about the proposed reforms. Of course, I'm not going to delve much on them, but what I picked from there is that there is a need to shift away from the current structure of local government, which is based on the two-tier system. From there to a single-tier local government. One may ask the questions why, or one may ask, why are we reviewing the white paper now? if you look at the principles or key assumptions of the white paper, 1998 white paper, most of those objectives have not fully materialized. So it means, as I'm talking now, there are what you call the systematic or structural challenges related to the current structure of local government, as well as the soft issues. If you look at the audit outcomes, you look at the reports produced by Coptown, the State of Local Government, and those compiled by the National Treasury, State of Local Government Finances and Financial Management. Obviously, the picture is very clear. Municipal performance is deteriorating, or municipalities are no longer living to expectations of providing services to their communities. As a result, the local government is faced up with public demonstrations or public protests, which are related to lack or poor service delivery. Now, in terms of the proposals, what are we saying? Are the proposals desirable and feasible? Yes, of course, they are desirable because the current structure of local government based on the two-tier system is associated with challenges such as poor governance, administrative incapacity, poor service delivery, and financial mismanagement, as well as corruption, so to say. And then as a result of that, it means the current structure of local government is no longer the best option. Therefore, there is a need for change in terms of the proposals made, stipulated in the first draft of the reviewed local government system. Now, if I have to come from the demarcation perspective, I would say, in terms of the Municipal Structures Act, we know very well of 117, 1998. It defined the types of municipalities that are to be established. And you look at the Demarcation Act 27 of 1998, which provides the criteria for demarcation or for redetermination of municipalities. As we are talking now, we do have category A, the so-called metropolitan municipalities, category B, the local municipalities, and the C, the district municipalities. So in terms of the proposals, yes, we are saying, and also in one of the papers that we have produced that talks about district municipalities, we do agree that one size approach is no longer relevant. In other words, for example, as we are talking now, in terms of funding, the model of funding does not look at the peculiarities of municipalities in terms of where municipalities are located, whether they are urban or rural, in terms of the population size, the economic base. Those are not included. So what we are saying is, if we adopt the differentiated approach, obviously such issues will be considered. And it will only be feasible if it is supported through legislative mandates and the institutionalization of feasibility framework within the MDB processes. Now we're saying, of course, there is a need for reclassification of municipalities. Like as Pascal said, we can retain the two-tier system outside the urban areas, and in other instances, we may do away with them. In the study that we conducted, for example, we looked at a weak local and a strong district municipalities. Under such circumstances, the district performs well. But there are instances where we have a strong, well-performing, or a local municipalities outperforming its parent district municipalities. So in such scenario, there would be no need to keep the district municipalities because they would be failed. When they were established, they were thought of coordinating and providing support to the local municipalities. But in cases where local municipalities are outperforming district, we can't retain them. But of course, there are instances where we cannot do away with districts because they will continue to provide their coordinating role with the hope that as time proceeds, then they'll be graduated from a two-tier system to a single-tier system. So we are saying the kind of reform should be sequenced through pilot implementation. It cannot just be imposed at once. And then the powers and function, of course, needs to be clarified and rationalized. But the hope here is that in terms of the IMDA bill, Independent Authority Bill, which is before Parliament now, it is, when you look at the powers and functions, they are now, in terms of the proposal within the MD, they are now to be transitioned from the Municipal Structures Act into the IMDA bill. Why? Just to rationalize and clarify the specific powers and functions for the type of municipalities that we have. And we also hope that the bill, if it becomes into a law, it will also clarify or resolve the complexities, which is ambiguities associated with the assessment of local government municipal powers and functions. Then finally, I would say, in order to realize those proposals, we also need to establish a framework for the implementation of demarcation criteria, a new framework for categorization of municipalities, which talks about new categories, which we hope that will be expanded to cater for all municipalities that we have. And for those municipalities that will still have districts, as Pascal said, we're talking about reorientation. It means the district needs to be strengthened in order that they provide the role that they're expected to do, to ensure that the local municipalities perform. As time goes on, then we'll move away from this one-size-fits-all of two-tier system of local government. So this is the debate which has long persisted, particularly within the optimal local government structure, focusing specifically on the appropriateness of the two-tier system of government. Is it still relevant? Is it still working? Of course, it's not. But most of the proposals that I talked about, obviously, they will address structural or systematic issues within the current local government structure. But the challenge or the issue will be on how do we resolve the soft issues, the financial mismanagement, governance issues. Obviously, it depends on whether there is a political will to confront those challenges. I mean, those problems are known. They are there. You look at the auditor's reports. Every year, year in, year out, these problems. The recent one, for example, is talking about over-reliance on the consultants, even though as municipalities employ staff to do the jobs which are performed by the consultants. So we need to look into that issue, and also to ensure that we draw a line between governance and administration within municipalities. Of course, there is interface, but the clear line should be established between the politics and the administration of municipalities to ensure that municipality officials execute their responsibilities efficiently. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dr. Paul. You've given us a lot to reflect upon. I want to invite our last panelist, Philip van Ryneveld, to come and share his views. For the last 40 years, he's been involved with local government, from working with local civic associations in the late 1980s as a technical advisor on fiscal decentralization to the ANC during the period of constitutional negotiations in the early 1990s. He's also been the executive director for corporate finance for the city of Cape Town. He has served on the Financial and Fiscal Commission with me at the time. So that's where I had the pleasure of interacting with Philip. And he's also currently a member of the core team involved in this review process, focusing on the municipal finance chapter. So we'll hand over to Philip. Philip, you've got 7 to 8 minutes to share your views, and then we'll take questions from our audience.
Thank you so much, Tanya. So, I was asked to look back at some of the history in the 90s. And in the 90s, those of us here who were involved then, and there are quite a few, we sort of had this blank sheet of us in front of us in terms of policies, and we dealt with these big ideas. And what we've learned in the period since then is the importance of making those big ideas practical in the real world. And we've done quite a lot. We've succeeded in quite a lot of ways, but we also know that there are huge gaps. So it's this big tension between the kind of the big ideas and making them practical in the real world. This white paper that we're doing now, an opportunity after sort of almost 3 decades, 26 years, 28 years, I think it is, since the last white paper. Again, we're being asked to sort of look at the big ideas. That's what a white paper is about. But I think all of us are much more mindful of the fact that of the importance of how you make it practical in the real world. And for that reason, in fact, the key final chapter of this white paper is all about the process of implementation, which is about doing this. But just to go back to sort of understand how some of these ideas get generated and then interpreted or even misinterpreted, the idea of districts originally came onto the agenda within the policy discourse in the 90s, actually as an alternative to provinces. There was all that debate about decentralization, much more so than in many constitution-making processes. And within the ANC, there were a number of different groupings. There were some groupings who were very centrist, but others who had this very strong sort of local autonomy, local democracy tradition, mostly coming through the United Democratic Front and the civic associations, etc. And in order to get a path forward, the ANC actually put together a document which is on the ANC's website, and I think it's worth going back and reading it. 1993, you'll find it there on the ANC website. It's called Regional Policy. And in many ways, the system of decentralization that we have in South Africa now, you can see that that's actually the origins. That document is the origins for the 3 spheres of government and how things work more or less as they do now. In putting together that paper, there was sort of, well, there were 2 key groupings around the provinces. There were some who said we needed 9, 10, actually was the number in the ANC, 10 regions. There was another group of people who said, no, we don't need 10. We need, instead of 10, we need something like 40 districts. So if there wouldn't have been the 9 or 10 provinces, there would have been central government, national government, 40 districts or so, and then your local government level. And that was where the idea came onto the agenda in quite a big way. In the end, I think the ANC felt that they could get agreement with the former government around the development bank regions, the 9 regions. It was a kind of a technocratic solution that helped advance a lot of the issues that needed to be advanced, and could get agreement on from all the key parties. And so the country went with the 9 provinces. In many ways, the sort of 40 region idea remained, and in some ways got expressed in the district level in the dispensation that we ended up with. And I think what for me is interesting is we had, there were a few key ideas driving us at that time. One idea was, of course, wall-to-wall local government, that there should be government across the whole country. The other was the importance of the sort of one city, one tax base idea. And a concept that I think works to some degree in some places, but mustn't be pushed too far, and does get pushed too far, and did get pushed too far. This idea that if you make the municipalities bigger, you somehow make them more viable, which of course is not true. If you put a poor area together with a poor area, you don't get a rich area. But certainly that idea of broad boundaries. And I would argue that actually in that process, we ended up with almost with 2 district levels outside the metros, with very widely drawn category B municipalities, and then the district level as we know it. And of course, it was this sort of one size fits all. Outside the metros, there would be just districts. In fact, within the metros, there were, of course, originally also 2 tiers. And then particularly because of the problems experienced in Johannesburg, I mean, that was the trigger around being unable to move resources from one part of Johannesburg to another. The idea of the single tier metro got more and more support, and that's what we'd ended up with. And I do think that the single tier metro, the idea of a single tier metro, I was quite ambivalent at the time. I think it's proven itself to have been a really good idea. But just to sort of close, I wanted to go through that history to just talk about how ideas happen. They come on the table, we take bits and pieces of them, how they end up in real life, maybe different from how they were intended. But I was thinking back through this and then thinking to myself around the Local Government Transition Act. That was a successful act. And one of the very interesting things that the Local Government Transition Act did is that it allowed for a bottom-up approach, where the different sort of statutory sides, we called it the statutory and non-statutory side, sort of got together, negotiated forums and so on, and kind of negotiated a way ahead at the local level that would work at the local level. And I think in going forward, we need to kind of remember that history and see if we can find a way that balances the ability to have this kind of flexible bottom-up creation of solutions with a framework from the center that keeps coherence and allows for a certain degree of consistency and also prevents getting bogged down in inertia as nobody agrees. So what is that process going to be that allows new forms of organizing local government in the non-metro areas, because we're particularly talking about the non-metro areas, that allows the new forms to emerge, taking into account what's practical at that local level, together with a framework that pulls it together and drives it forward and keeps a certain degree of coherence. And creating that balance, I think, is critical, and creating that organizational capacity at the center that can kind of both listen and push forward in developing this new system is going to be critical. What this local government white paper, it's not yet adopted, but where it's going is it's kind of opening up new possibilities, and that's important. But we have to be careful that that doesn't then lead to a process of fragmentation and disorganization and inertia as we get too many voices and not enough coherence in terms of bringing together to a solution. So I'm not sure how that balance is going to be achieved, but certainly that's what we've got to go and look towards. And I do think that the Local Government Transition Act is an interesting example in our own history of how we managed a process that was both bottom up and top down. So I'll leave that there. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks a lot for that, Philip. As you were talking about how one starts in the design phase being very coherent and then too many voices come in, it reminds me of the saying that a camel is a racehorse designed by a committee. And also maybe the panelists can think about the fact that everybody agrees that the status quo isn't working, but there's always resistance to change, even if it is positive, even if it's in our best interest, even if we all agree that it's necessary. So how do we deal with the change management side of things? I also want to now maybe just focus on some questions from the floor, and then also open up to questions from our audience. The question from Monwa Bizi Rataza is, and I'm opening it up to all of the panelists, should the two-tier municipal system be dissolved or cease to exist? What impact would this have on the implementation and effectiveness of the district development model? But before we take responses to those questions, if there are any questions that anybody in the audience would like to pose, please raise your hand and we'll give you an opportunity. Okay, I don't see any questions raised. Besides that, if you do have any questions, please put it in the chat box. I'm going to head back to our panelists and just ask them to briefly respond to the rich insights that have emerged from our fellow panelists. I'm going to go back to Pascal, then to Johan, Paul, and Philip. So Pascal, you've heard the feedback from the panelists. What are your thoughts, especially on issues of, having a coherent all of government view, and also how do we manage, how do we deal with capacity issues? I think Johan mentioned the capacity issues, the intergovernmental relations aspects as well. So yeah, what are your thoughts, Pascal? You need to unmute. You've got your mute button.
I think that's the danger of focusing on chapter 2 in the absence of looking at the rest of the document. I think most of the points that Johan raised are contained in the white paper. Maybe not to the extent that you raised, Johan, but for instance, the issue around capacity building. I think it's in chapter 3, Philip, where we talk about a common central depository of capacity interventions, with the observation that you have capacity development initiatives from the School of Governance, from SALGA, from the CETAs and all that are not really probably impactful as we'd like to be, and we want to see coordination across government in the way that we build capacity at municipal level. Chapter 4 and 5 specifically deal with the two systems that you're raising, Johan, the political system and the administrative system. In the political system, yes, the white paper goes to an extent of beginning to talk about competencies of councillors and focusing at least on the office bearers, which is something we hope the political parties will take into account as they go and prepare and select candidates going into the future. But the issue about ethics and the competencies of councillors is raised there. Just as in the chapter that deals with administrative systems, the issue around political, administrative professionalizing the appointment, the selection, and the monitoring of our professionals. I'm just in a meeting here. Someone was talking about the C-suite, and I was wondering what the C-suite is. And I got to understand that it's the CEO, the Chief Operating Officer, and the CFO. That suite of players needs to be extremely competent and extremely experienced. About how appointments, where politics come into the appointments of municipal managers, where their mandate stops, and also suggesting that the municipal managers should be allowed to employ without undue political interference their direct reports. So some of those things are there, but they are really informed by the point that you're making about that at the end of the day, it's about the competency of our political and administrative leaders that will make these changes possible or not possible. I won't comment on Right Konyana. We are in a way colleagues, so he's saying the same thing when it comes to the point of view of the demarcations board. But he raises a very important point about really, I think it's a short-term thing that hopefully through the passing of the Independent Municipal Demarcations Act, the issues around rationalizing and dealing with ambiguities would be addressed, and that will have a new criteria. Probably it has to be broader than just the Demarcations Act, bringing the FFC, bringing other players to look at the demarcation criteria, whether it's ward or outer boundaries, but those criteria need to be much more developmental than the technical design that it has at the moment. Philip, you're taking me back, really back, the 40 regions idea, and I think let's debate the issue about the LGTA. But yes, maybe we might not say let's have an act, but there are strong elements that were contained in the Transition Act that we might maybe want to bring into consideration through the transition management mechanisms that we're talking about. Safe to say that we had a different view in Johannesburg about the relationship between local and national. We didn't see any district, we didn't see any province. We wanted a direct, strong national, weak, intermediate, and strong local. I think that was the point that we're pushing through the Johannesburg chamber. The DDM, No, it shouldn't. It shouldn't affect the DDM for two reasons. One, personally, I think it was a big mistake to talk about the regional development model as a district model, because it now locks us into thinking that the DDM is about jurisdictional areas or municipal boundaries, when it's supposed to be a broader mechanism that brings in a whole lot of players into a space that makes itself possible for joint investment, joint delivery of services, etc., that might transcend even outside municipal boundaries. So that idea, it's still there for the DDM. It's in chapter 10, the type of outcomes and partnerships and relationships that we'd want to see between government and the rest of society in making sure that development, economic, and otherwise outcomes are achieved in our local spaces. So it shouldn't, in fact, it might even enhance the DDM much more stronger, that you look at development in a space and using some of the mechanisms or approaches that have been designed through the DDM. Thanks, Tanya.
Okay, great. Over to you, Jan. Maybe if you have time, you can also reflect on the DDM. And then I just want to, raise the issue of capacity. Because if I look at everybody who's graduating just from my university, right? And when I look at the competence profiles of many people in government, they have like PhDs and masters and all sorts of qualifications. So why is it that we are still 30 years later, 40 years later, being constrained by capacity? So if you could share your thoughts on that, that would be great.
Tanya, I will try and be brief, although there are chapters that one can write, not only about capacity, but I think also the broader issue around change management, something that you have raised. At the outset, I want to say that, or I want to make the point rather that, although this white paper speaks to local government, there is a lot to be said about the role of the provinces and the national when it comes to driving change management, monitoring change management, encouraging it. One can just take the example, for example, of the metro trading reform, where the National Treasury comes in very, with a heavy hand, and they say you shall do the following over the next period, and there are very clear time frames. Now, clearly, one must invest in that kind of capacity, because change will not happen by itself. There are entrenched economies. I'm a practitioner. I work with the entrenched economies, and with that I meant corrupt economies. And they make money out of the inertia. They make money out of things not changing, because that is the problem. So change management and it being driven at an appropriate level, at the levels of either province or national, is something that is squarely, in my view, at the door of those levels of government, to the extent that they are then given that kind of authority. So for me, that is the first, and it's very important. Otherwise, we're going to be stuck. When it comes to capacity, it is very closely aligned to change management, because change management also assumes that there is a leadership. There's an administrative leadership, there is a political leadership that actually wants this, that actually driving it. And it's hard. Change management in Tshwane is hard. People talk about soft skills, convincing people, that they're working for the good of government. But it's a hard skill. There's nothing soft about it. So it takes years to move a city from where they don't care about, let's say, consequence management, to where they actually do. So that gives you an idea of what it would take, and you do need to be able to then attract those people that can combine what they have been taught at university on the one hand to what it takes to make a department or a municipality cohere internally. My colleagues would know, both Pascal and Philip would know. Incoherence within a municipality is absolutely par for the course. There's no argument about that. So the leadership and the capacity would then need to cohere around that, and we must then make sure that we recruit along those lines, that we train along those lines. Very lastly, the encouragement to perform. I absolutely buy into the idea that the money that we get should be performance based. You must deserve those money. I think my colleagues at the national and provincial levels, where the money gets handed to you, they're being done a disservice. It's at local level where we are now learning. If you don't work, if you don't achieve certain outcomes, you're not going to get the funding. So I do think that capacity, managing the performance, and then having very clear performance objectives would enable us to then drive this process. Thank you.
Thanks, Johan. Dr. Paul, can I invite you to share whatever thoughts you have on what the previous panelists have put on the table? And then if you have any thoughts on the DDM, you're welcome to share those as well.
Okay, thanks for that, for the opportunity. You know, as my colleagues were talking, I asked myself, are there no intervention for capacity building now? They are there, but maybe we need to reflect and ask a question: what's wrong with them? Why are they not working? Are we going? What kind of new capacity building challenge? What do you call programs are we going to come up? Or are we saying those that we have now are not effective? I mean, there are so many initiatives by SALGA, by COCTA, NSG, but still we encounter challenges with our municipalities. So what's wrong with them? I don't think capacity that we have now is not working. Most of the problems that are raised here, even related to the local governments, are human related, if we have to be, except those which are systematic in terms of the structure of local government. But the governance failures, incapacity, and the issue of incapacity, yes, I do agree with you, Ajam, that universities are producing graduates, people are being capacitated, but we still have this problem. Why? I don't think capacity is a real problem here. Maybe it's how we channel, or how the people that we put in power, or maybe failing to dissociate administration with politics. I think there's a problem there. Now, regarding the issue of DDM, for me, I would say it will depend on the implementation, or it depends on the implementation of DDM. Before DDM, there were so many interventions for local government, Project Consolidated, and many others. Now, one may ask a question, where are they? Is DDM something that will soon be forgotten? I'm not sure. It will depend on how it is implemented. But if it is properly implemented, yes, obviously, it will add value in as far as the proposals for the local government system is concerned. Now, the issue of, like I said, mindset. I think the problem has to do with governance and leadership. If we can get that correct, because it won't make a point to come up with a complete reviewed white paper. Yes, with those good ideas. But who are to implement this? Human beings. So if we don't put the right people to run our municipalities with the right skills, I'm telling you, the reviewed white paper will still be a futile exercise. So we need to consider those, what I'm saying very seriously, to say human beings responsible for driving some of this proposal and the process, yes, should be qualified, We're talking about professionalization. It needs to be properly implemented in order to ensure that our municipalities are well run. And to reflect more on the capacity that we are talking about, which I don't think we don't have now, but we need to look at why the current capacity frameworks are not working. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for that, Dr. Paul. Philip, let's bring you in. Do you have any thoughts to share on what other panelists have contributed and also on the DDM?
Yeah, a couple of things. First of all, remind Pascal that the 40 region idea became in that discussion document the 16 region idea, and the 16 regions were essentially the metros being regions in their own right. That was the whole thing. So what you talk about the Johannesburg, the forums there, it was reflected in that. So I was just remembering that. Now, and on the capacity issue, I actually want to say two things. First of all, I think in the white paper, and not just in the white paper, elsewhere, there's an increasing focus on alternative service delivery mechanisms. There was initially a focus on, oh my goodness, these municipalities are not functioning. We need to take the functions away from them. The 4B and 5B functions must be removed. And then the question is, so where do they get removed to? Is this because the provinces and national governments are such stunning performers that they are going to do it better than local government? And quite a lot of skepticism about that. So I think that where we're sort of moving towards is much more focus on the separation between the authority and the service provider, and allowing for external service providers that might cross more than one municipal boundary, and that may not necessarily be public sector. They may be public sector, but they may not be. There may be public-private partnerships or whatever. So in a sense, opening up the possibilities of bringing a much wider range of South Africa's delivery capability into the municipal sector through a more systematic separation between authority and service provider. And I think that's a very, very important mechanism that we have, that I certainly support, and that we have to move ourselves towards in a practical and incremental way. And I think that a lot of the issues around two-tier local government, particularly in the rural areas, which was about, oh, the locals don't have capacity, so we need a district, might well be solved by these locals are small. We are going to have alternative service providers that may have boundaries that are beyond districts or combination of municipalities or whatever. So it's and so the capacity issue is dealt with not through a district, but through an external service provider. So I think that's a really, really important theme, and I think an important one to move into the future. But there's one other point that I want to make about capacity. At the moment, the local government system is not functioning well. There is a lot of maladministration, and we know that there's quite high levels of corruption and so on. And I don't want to downplay that at all. And that's got to be, we've got to get to grips with that. And the white paper says a lot about that. But I also want to point out the major financial challenges that have come about since the last white paper in 1998. So in around about 2000, the electricity sector already in local government accounted for about 30% of all revenue. Property tax by comparison was about 20%. Okay, so electricity is already half as much a gain as property tax. That was in 2000. Between 2008 and now, the price of bulk electricity has increased 9 times against an inflation increase of 1.5 times. And essentially, it translates into a quadrupling of the bulk cost of electricity. Now, given that electricity was such a big part of local government finance 20 years ago, that massive increase in bulk costs of electricity has had a huge impact on local government, because it was the biggest item on municipal account on the municipal budget before all of these Eskom changes happened. It was the biggest item in households' municipal bills before all these changes happened. And since then, you've had this quadrupling of the electricity price. One of the things that has meant is that households have much less money to pay for all of their municipal services. It also means that municipalities have been having to absorb the shock to some degree. They have passed all these costs on to households. So the subsidization that used to go from electricity to the rates and general services has more or less disappeared. In fact, in some ways, it's almost the reverse now. And that's partly, particularly in the water sector, that municipalities are coming up against the limits of cross-subsidization through volumetric tariffs. Systems Act requires that your tariffs for service charges be basically volume-based. But the rising block tariff on water and similarly on electricity means that the high-end users are now increasingly beginning to find other sources. Electricity is no problem. They put the panels on their roofs. And so the scope for cross-subsidizing through volumetric tariffs is disappearing. And so what we're seeing is more and more pressure then coming on the creation of a fixed charge, which I mean, I think has merit. In Cape Town, you saw an attempt to make that fixed charge relate to property values. So in a sense, what you're using is your property value base as a fixed charge. So beginning now with these service charges, whereas previously they used to cross-subsidize rates, now we're actually moving into a situation where rates are having to cross-subsidize them. And how that applies in the ring fencing, the metro trading services, to me is going to be very interesting. Then you have the RSC levies, which were really buoyant source of revenue in around about 2000, 2006. I mean, the figures I have, because I did some work as they were being closed, is that in most of the metros, the RSC levies represented about 45% of property tax. That was how much money they collected. In Joburg, it was 56% in 2006, 56% of property tax in RSC levies. That was then done away with, replaced with a share of the fuel levy, an origin-based share of the fuel levy, where 23% of the national fuel levy is given to the metros. In the non-metros, it was replaced with grants. At any rate, and then you get shared amongst the metros basically on where the fuel levy originated, so where the fuel sales take place. But fuel sales have stagnated. In fact, from about 2015, 16, they started stagnating. And actually, since COVID, volumes of fuel consumed have been falling. They're quite a lot lower than they were in 2020 now. So that source of revenue to particularly to metros is disappearing. And then on the other side, on the demand side, you've got this massive in-migration. And again, if I take a metro perspective, in 2008, 2000, around about then, in the metros, the average household income, average household income in the metros was highest. Now, because of the in-migration, actually, it's metro average household income is lower than secondary cities. So you've got all these pressures happening. And for me, that is the other big elephant in the room that is not being addressed. And we're hoping to sort of highlight it through the white paper process. Yes, we've got to get to grips with where the structures are going wrong, where there is corruption, where there is maladministration, how we fix those things. But there is a real problem on the finance side that we have to take seriously, because if we don't take that seriously, really, I don't think we're going to be able to rescue the situation. Now, how we do it, the instruments we use, plenty of debate to be had around that. And I can go into that, but I'm not, we haven't got much time here now. But just to say that issue, and it doesn't necessarily have to be addressed tomorrow, but if it's not addressed over the next 2-3 years, and we don't get a new direction on the finance side, I think we're going to see a lot of municipalities in a death spiral, where the tariffs become unaffordable, people stop paying, they try and cross-subsidize from rates, the rates become unaffordable, people stop paying rates, and we move into a bit of a, and then there's no money for maintenance. In fact, already there's very little money for maintenance, and we move into this death spiral. So I just want to make sure that issue of the finances is put on the agenda. Salga produced a report about 2 years ago that asked for a massive increase in the transfers from national government to local government. A huge change in the vertical split. We know that's not going to happen. National government doesn't have the money, to take away from you can't just take away the money from education and health and policing and all of these things. We're going to have to grow our way out of the problem. But that needs thought, and that needs attention, and that's a big capacity issue that is the drum I want to beat now, because I don't think it's being beaten enough. Thanks.
Thanks a lot for that. So I just want to examine the argument that you're putting on the table, because I happen to agree with it, right? So when the general public...
Sorry, Tanya, if I could be excused, yeah. I really need to run.
Thank you, Pascal.
But thank you very much for the invite, and I hope it was very useful. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Hopefully we'll engage with you on another platform. Thank you.
I hope so too. Sure.
Thanks,
Um,
Pascal.
Coming back to the issue that you were raising, Philip. So, when the general public reads about local government, the immediate assumption is that it's a problem of fiscal effort. You're not billing, right? Okay. Or mismanagement. You're inefficient, or you stealing, and that's why you can't actually deliver. And all of those three uh, is actually true in certain instances, right? But I think City of Cape Town is very interesting because if you could ignore all of those and say, let's say you were an efficient city. And I think that if you look at our cities, City of Cape Town would be right up there, right? So if you assumed, and economists can make heroic assumptions, right? So if you assume those things away, right? The argument is that because of these structural changes in the finance, even with the most efficient municipalities or cities who are applying maximum fiscal effort, we will still have a deepening structural fiscal problem, right? Because of issues that you mentioned, things like, the electricity grid subsidies, more and more people coming off the grid, right? With water as well, we're moving into an independent water regulator scenario, which will create its own challenges for local government. But I want to come back to the issue of no new money. And what does this mean for change management? So I want to quote my colleague, Dr. Len Mortimer. I read something that he wrote on the white paper, and he was saying, oh, actually, the patient is on the table, right? But we expect the patient to go out and heal itself. So whereas the patient might need occupational therapy, whereas the patient might need better nutrition, medication, etc. Um, and so if we want to have massive systemic change, how do we do that when we also have these binding fiscal constraints? And does it come down to political will to say that we are going to definitely cut certain things in order to protect certain things, right? And when I look at local government functions, those are pivotal not only for equity but also for economic growth. If we don't have them, then we're not going to get economic growth. So maybe if I can ask the panelists to share any thoughts on the issue of resourcing in change management. I'm not saying that we need to unlock lots of extra funding because we won't have that. But I think that in some places, having an investment to promote the transition could really help. So any thoughts on that from the panelists? Paul, Johan, Philip?
Okay, thanks. Maybe I would say, yes, it's true that municipalities are battling with financial constraints, whatever. But if you look at, for example, there is also this culture of non-payment for services, failure to raise revenues from property rates. Then one may ask a question, why this happens? I would say, if for example, on the other hand, municipalities were delivering services, people like they used to do, they will carry on. Like some are still they are paying for the services and what they are supposed to do. But if the municipalities are not rendering services as expected, even people who have been paying have now stopped paying. And indirectly, that also enhances the problem regarding the financial muscle of the municipalities. Yes, it's a catch-22 situation, but you are saying people are asking the question, why should we pay for the services if there is no value for the money that we are paying? It's a challenge that needs to be looked into, because if it is addressed indirectly, it may and force people to do what? To continue to pay for the services. It may not be as much as expected, but it will contribute to the funds of the municipality. Now, the other issue is that one of looking at the economic base or the environmental resource within municipalities. Municipalities vary in terms of their resources. Some are tourists, municipalities, some do have mines, whatever. So I would say if such environmental resources are well managed and properly, or the money can be generated out of that. But as a result, like my colleague said, the issue of corruption, of stifling money. I mean, we are following this issue of the commission. You can just see how much money is being stolen from municipalities. It's quite a lot. If that money was fruitfully utilized, I think our municipalities would be doing well. They would not be where they are at the moment. So yes, it's a problem that still needs to be resolved. It remains, but we can start thinking of how we do our things, how we run our municipalities, in order to see how little that we can get. Like you rightfully indicated, the country does, the National Treasury does not have money, but we need to be innovative. And we also need to resolve our problems to see where we went wrong in order to encourage people to pay for their services. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Paul. I'm going to turn to the comments in the chat box before we go for our final round of comments from the panelists. Philip, do you want to come in?
No. I have some. I wanted to respond to the question you posed, but I can do it subsequently.
I think come in. If it's a direct follow-up, please do come in.
So I think the reality is that national government doesn't have more money just to give to local government, and so that we have to be innovative, and we have to balance this thing. You can't put more money into the system if it's then going to be used corruptly. So it is a balancing act. I do think that national government is going to have to make some amounts of money available to help emergency surgery, for example. It's not going to be large amounts, but it's an incentive to start doing things in a different way and moving in a different direction. One of the proposals that I would like discussion about, and Tanya, this is something that we must talk more about, that fuel levy share, that origin-based fuel levy. We have to think about what we're going to replace that with in the not too distant future. And my sort of first thought on that was that instead of using the general fuel levy as the base, we should be rather using the VAT as the base. And when I talk about origin-based VAT, I'm not getting into the issues of whether VAT is origin or destination-based and all of that. All I'm saying is that find some way of saying, can municipalities, and it wouldn't be all of municipalities, because for the poorer municipalities, it doesn't actually make a difference or make sense. But certainly for the ones that currently get the share of the fuel levy, would it not make sense to find some way of saying, well, instead of getting you a share of the fuel levy, give you a share of the VAT that's generated in your area, to the same amount as the fuel levy. And what that means is that if you are able to grow your economy in your area, then you're able to increase your revenue. At the moment, the incentive with the fuel levy is, if you want more money from the fuel levy, you must make people spend more money on petrol. And that's not a great incentive, and it doesn't work. We've got to find ways of getting urban areas, because that's where a lot of the growth is, to be those engines of growth. Of course, there's also mining and agriculture and so on, but the urban areas as growth drivers is really important. And so what is it that we can do with that second general source of revenue that can, in a way, reward growth and also allow municipalities to kind of grow their way out of this crisis? And of course, as they grow their way out of the crisis and we get growth, then national government will, of course, be getting a larger share of that additional and gives more scope for transfers to poorer regions. So I think we need to talk about what is that second general source of revenue. I mean, we can carry on for a year or two, couple of years, a few years with general fuel levy, that's fine. But a white paper has to look further down the line. And that issue of the second general source of revenue, we had RSC levies, we replaced them with a general fuel levy share. That general fuel levy share is coming to an end. It's not going to work in the future, and we increasingly know it. So what are we going to do about that? And can we do something that becomes a kind of a growth enhancer, an incentive for growth, and helps us grow our way out of this fiscal problem? There are many answers to this question on the financial resources, but I just wanted to get that one on the table.
Thanks, Philip. Also, a plug for our next webinar is going to focus on the finance chapter. So we're going to have you back for that one. Monwa BC, I see your hand is up. I'm going to give you an opportunity to speak. I just want to run through some of the comments from the floor. From Bafana Maseko, comment from experience through observation. The state of local government in the last 10 to 15 years has declined very rapidly from a service delivery perspective. The NDP 2030 spells out exactly what the developmental issues are in general. We are suffering from a lack of implementation of policies. To say these proposals, new amendments will result in better implementation of policy is really difficult to see happening. Then from Mr. Deval, how does the review of the white paper on local government intend to address the financial sustainability, powers and functions, and long-term institutional role of district municipalities? Specifically, what policy direction is being considered regarding unfunded mandates, grant dependencies, revenue responsibilities of district municipalities that are not water service authorities? So some of these finance issues will definitely be picked up in the next webinar that will deal with the finance chapter of the reviewed paper on local government. And I think that we have to some extent touched on the issues of district functions, both from Mr. Malloy's presentation and then also some of the other panelists. From Yasmin Kuvadia, will the best of capacity make a non-viable municipality work? Is the economic base of the municipality the most important factor of municipal viability? And that really speaks to the issue that Philip also raised about fiscal effort versus fiscal capacity. If there is a serious problem with fiscal capacity, you can put in the most, expert administrator. You can jack up your fiscal effort, but that might not influence your long-term sustainability. So I'm going to hand over to Monwa BC. If you can please just put on your camera and share your thought or comment with us.
Thank you very much.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you very much. Apologies for this presentation of myself. However, I just wanted to ask, based on, I think that it would be on the Systems Act and the MFMA, I think that it would be Chapter 10 and Chapter 8A, which both, I think, that speak on municipal entities. And I think that I've done research in the past. Maybe if we could look at the People's Republic of China as a model where you find that they've got municipalities owning companies. Some of them are owning Cherry. Today we know Biaik, and I don't know whether it's SAIC or something like that, of that extent. Now in South Africa, I'm not sure whether perhaps a state can own a private company which is independent, has its own governing laws with perhaps that does not necessarily perform a government function, so to speak. So I just wanted to check perhaps if indeed can municipalities employ such ideas where municipalities, I'm from Stellenbosch municipality, and Stellenbosch has got so much land. And I'm asking that maybe for extra revenue, why don't we have our own processing plant, sort of a mini distil or a mini Heineken, owning our very own farms where we can employ people. Those entities will therefore be run on a private basis, although there will be reporting to the municipality or under the management of the municipality. However, they will be independent, so to say, for extra revenue. And not that revenue can therefore subsidize the services which the residents do not necessarily pay for or perhaps are taxed for in order to have.
Thank you. You are suggesting looking at innovation. We have noted that. I want to just invite Zolani. You've also got your hand up. Please come in and make a brief contribution, and then we'll head back to our panelists to wrap up. Zolani, please go ahead.
Thanks, Prof, and good afternoon to the panelists. No, mine are not questions because I also have these specifically on local government, which really applaud SPL, South African Cities Network, to continue delivering them because there is a need for them. But two things, one that came from Upol, on why the capacity building is not working. It is not indeed, and it's time that we begin to look at who do we even appoint to run those capacity building sessions. I'll make an example. It's one thing to have a facilitator, give that person a manual to say, go and train without experience on that particular field. That's where our problem is. Touching on what Johan also raised on change management and the fact that it's about people. Even now, if change management were doing it right at a municipal space, there ought already to be sessions around this policy change that is coming, so that when the implementation comes, it lands on the change champions that ought to be there, so that it becomes much smoother. And on the change management, you can draw, for an example, from the lessons from SARS when modernization took place. We can draw from the Western Cape government when that transition in 2009 took place. If we can be able to emulate those, I think on change management, we can be in a position to really make the policy implementation easier for those that will be affected. Let me stop there, Prof. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thanks, Zolani. I'm going to hand over, maybe Johan, do you have any closing remarks? We'll move on to Dr. Paul and Philip after that. Over to you, Johan.
Okay, thanks, Tanya. I'll be brief. There will never be enough time. I completely take the point that Monmabisa has made around the innovation and the issue around private companies. Currently, as you would know, it is not allowed. We cannot have a stake in a private company, nor can we set up a private company. It will have to be a municipal-owned entity as per the Systems Act, Chapter 8A, and so on. So that is the case currently. We might want to look at that. We might want to look at the metros playing in that field. It must be regulated. Similarly, accessing foreign funding, just in order to create other funding streams. So all of those are in my view, avenues that need to be explored because we have to accept the fact that not every municipality is the same, not even every metro is the same. So it will depend on the amount of regulation, the extent to which we can then explore those alternative avenues of revenue. Very lastly, colleagues, the issue around change management is really important. That's my closing remark. It is critically important. Politicians and administrators must be on the same page. If they are not on the same page, if different agendas are being pursued, we are chasing our tails. That is the truth, and I'm speaking now as a practitioner. So there has to be a very strong push from the national and provincial government that they will push these reforms much stronger than what was the case in the past. It's like the example that you gave, Tanya, of the patient. You don't get off an operating table without assistance. It is just how it is. So there has to be a very strong push, I think, on that side. And then lastly, thank you very much for this platform. It is really useful to contribute and just to think about stuff. Often people like me, we just fight fires, but thinking is also great. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Dr. Paul, any closing remarks from your side?
Thank you very much. Zolani raised a very critical point. I think for me, he's suggesting that maybe municipalities are to be run like enterprises. But if they have to be run in that way, obviously that would require for legislative amendment as well. So for me, I would say the local government sector or local government is a very complex sector that needs what I would say a holistic approach in addressing its challenges. Yes, challenges cannot be resolved at once, but if they are sequenced through pilot implementation, perhaps most of municipal challenges that we have, the current one, may be minimized or reduced. And I think we also need to talk about the vision. Yes, China is a good example, but if you look at the history of China, they had their own vision in as far as what kind of local government they want, how many municipalities they need. To this day, we don't know how many municipalities we need. And as an entity here, Municipal Demarcation Board, we keep on receiving requests from members of the public, from municipalities, requesting either for their municipalities to be de-established or to be amalgamated. But in the absence of the vision in terms of the number of municipalities that we need, like Japan, I think we'll have a problem. As the entity, we have to implement the legislation. We cannot say no to the requests that we receive, but we have to look at them to see whether they meet the requirements. So I would say we really need to think of the vision of the local government as a country. Looking at those assumptions of the white paper, yes, they are there, but they are not happening. Obviously, those were the aims. The assumptions were municipalities will be well run, they'll be able to raise their finances, people will be paying for their services, and look where we are now at the moment. Totally the opposite of that. So we need to rethink in terms of where do we want to take our municipalities, but at the same time, municipal space, municipal context matters when you talk about municipalities. Whatever we learn as best practice from other countries may not work in our case in South Africa, because context is very important. I do agree that we need a complete overhaul of the local government. But through the reviewing of the white paper, I wonder whether will that yield a miracle to change the status quo. But I don't think it will completely do that unless we adopt a holistic approach to address both the systematic issues as well as the soft issues simultaneously. Thank you. And I wish to thank you for affording me the opportunity to also participate in this platform. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Philip. Over to you to have the last word.
Thank you. And look, the white paper is really only about finding a new direction that you're going in. It's not the journey itself. So, the white paper is by no means going to bring about change. It's just about thinking about how we're going to do it. I think I just want to use my last little time by just highlighting this issue of the distinction between service authority and service provider. There's quite a lot of discussion happening about these days. There's the issue of licensing, the notion that any service provider needs to be licensed, whether they be a municipal service provider or an external service provider, and that this might become a way of really forcing municipalities to, in fact, choose the right service provider. But then I think there's a lot of detail that still needs to be filled in, and this is where I think we need more thought. Where does authority end and service provision begin? What does it mean for setting of tariffs? What does it mean for tariff setting in a context where a provider serves more than one municipality, and so on? And then how are these service providers going to emerge? Are they going to emerge out of the public sector, public-private partnerships, private sector? So I think there's a lot of issues there which are very important, because I do think that they can be a lot of the solution to many of our service delivery problems. But I think we need a lot more detail on that. So that was just the one thing I kind of wanted to end with highlighting, but really just to say thank you very much, Tanya, and to the organization for this opportunity to have these discussions. I've really enjoyed it and appreciated it. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Philip. I see that we've gone slightly over time. I'm sorry, Paul, we have to draw this discussion to a close. But I just want to make a plug for our next webinar on finances and the finance chapter of the reviewed white paper on local government, because as you see, a lot of the discussion comes down to the financial viability. So please do join us there. Thank you for indulging us. I think you'll agree with me that the extra 10 minutes was well worth the effort. So thanks, everybody. Thanks to Danga for arranging the awesome panel. Thanks to Sean and Sadna and the SACN team for the professional management of this event. Goodbye, and see you at the next webinar.
Bye.
Cheers. Thank you very much.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye. Tanya, is it just okay?